So now comes the fun but futzy part. So get the dog out of the room, get the kids out of the room, send your partner, roommate, whatever, off to shopping for you. So that you can do this quietly without being disturbed, because it's time to start placing the pieces. So first of all, we're going to take the background piece, which is these horseshoes, and notice that it's directional, so you want to make sure that all your squares are going the same way, so when the quilt's all done, they all look like the same. And then we're going to start placing the pieces. So the boot topper part is a background, so a background piece you start with, and then you lay the other pieces on top. So the shoe part you lay on top of the boot, and then the shoe sole goes underneath the boot. But see, this is not centered, so I have fussed and fussed and fussed and made a whole bunch of mistakes so that you don't have to. And I figured out that it comes out to about, the shoe needs to be about 2.5 inches from the edge, and the toe needs to be about 2.5 inches from the edge, and then the blue needs to be about 1.5 inches from the top, and the bottom of this sole needs to be about 1.5 inches. So let me futz a little bit. And then you also need a pair of handy dandy tweezers. I like these Martelli tweezers because they're really the most accurate. I'm gonna pinch your head. If you remember that, you're too old. Anyway, I'm putting the shoe piece over the sole, and then I'm placing, so I'm holding with my finger the piece I want to lift up, and then with the tweezers I'm placing underneath the other piece. Now I'm going to see how close that is to, so it's about 2.5 inches, that's about 2.5 inches, and that's a little more than 1.5 inches, and that's a little less than 1.5 inches, but it's almost close enough. I'm just going to push that down a little. And then this piece goes here. You really want to follow. They give you this handy dandy boot diagram that shows you exactly where every piece goes. And it really is helpful to follow that. So that's the little boot trim on the top. And here's the little inside of the boot, this little black piece. And the boot strap goes here. And the inside of the other side of the boot strap goes right there. So I'm going to fuss with this, and I'll be right back and show it to you before we iron it down. So here's what you end up with after you futzed and futzed for a little bit. The boot top goes almost straight up and down, or pretty much straight up and down, and then this point here matches up with that side of the boot, and this point here matches up with that side of the boot. And then this goes here, and the little inside of the boot is the background, and then your boot toppers, and your sole is behind, and it's ready to iron down. So with this particular kind of interfacing, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and straight down. You don't want anything to move. 1, 2, 3, and I know you're probably freaking out that I'm ironing on my cutting board, but it's only for 3 seconds, so I'm hoping it's not messing anything up. Anyway, now it's all ironed down, and the next thing to do is to sew it together. So now it's time to do the applique stitch around the edges of the boot to finish it, to permanently hold it down and to give it a nice finish. And I couldn't decide exactly how to do it, so the way for me to decide is to try different stitches on my machine, so I discover stitches. And there's basically a zigzag stitch that's kind of close together, and then there's a blanket stitch, which is this looking one where it stitches along and then goes over and stitches along and goes over. So I tried, first of all, I tried different colors of threads, and I tried a cream, and I tried a dark brown, and then I tried this Aurifil 2320, and this color seems to be the color I like best, but really, whatever thread you got, use it. Don't go out and buy a spool of thread just for this. And then you can see I tried different stitches on my machine, and I changed the stitch length, and I changed the stitch width, and trust me, you want to write every one of these things down. Every time you make a change, write it down, and then write down whether you like it or not. And I just used some scraps of pieces on the background to try all the different stitches and see what I liked. And what I decided, and then oh look, I have this extra one that I made that, see how it's not centered? This is how we learn. But I ended up liking kind of this close together zigzag stitch, which sort of gave it a more finished edge. You might like something that's more open, it goes quicker if it's more open. But anyway, I like this closed zigzag stitch, so I'm going to get my sewing machine set up and show you how to stitch these down.